Star Wars Outlaws has become, shall we say, quite the cautionary tale for the franchise and for gaming in general, or at least that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that, well, there's just too many games with this type of problem lately. Games which exemplify both the potential and the pitfalls of trying to create ambitious open-world games, specifically in this case a Star Wars game, one of the first, if not the first actually, open-world Star Wars game. Now, on the one hand, Outlaws kind of aims to allow players to freely explore the galaxy. However, the reception to this, the reaction to some of the videos we've seen so far has been less than stellar. And that's because the execution appears to be at least leaving much to be desired. Now, the recent IGN gameplay video, the one from last week, has a terrible dislike ratio. Look at this here, around about 84-85% dislike. The more recent ones fared a little bit better, but still well over 50% disliked. What is the problem? Well, people are calling out, fans are calling out lackluster visuals, stiff animations, performance issues, and a general lack of polish. Meanwhile, many other people feel that Outlaws borrows far too much from Ubisoft's now generic game mechanics. And that specifically is something I'm not too keen on seeing, and neither am I keen on seeing the overpowered nature of the main character, Kay Vess. And there's quite a few examples of this throughout the various videos. Perhaps the most egregious one is in the leaked footage. Now obviously I can't show you that here, and hopefully this feature doesn't make it into the final game. But with this feature, Kay uses the slowdown of time dilation effectively to automatically target various different villains. You just kind of tag them and then execute the command and they automatically get shot. I don't know about you, but this is a little bit too automated for my taste and feels not really like a game at all, but instead just some type of quick time event and automated experience. Elsewhere, we have this particular issue. Look how the NPC simply doesn't react to the explosion and just stands there looking in the opposite direction, albeit with a question mark above their head, whilst Kay shoots them in the back. Far too much of this type of thing going on. Elsewhere, other parts I weren't too keen on is the constant walking around. Now, there's a really interesting, potentially very interesting quest actually, where Kay is sent down into the depths of a sarlacc. Inside the sarlacc pit here, inside the sarlacc, this you would have thought that should be a great opportunity for a lot of different things going on. But what it turns out to be is a very bland fetch quest. Kay simply walking through these different tunnels, these different caves, until getting to the objective at the end, and then simply walking back out again. How very, very dull. And perhaps that's another problem. One thing that I was kind of getting a little bit tired of seeing in Star Wars is the constant use of these same old settings. Do we really need to visit Tatooine again? I mean, let's put it this way. According to the Star Wars Visual Encyclopedia reference book, the galaxy contains over 3.2 billion habitable star systems. Whilst we don't know how many of those systems are actually inhabited, there's obviously still a lot more than just Tatooine, Coruscant, and the few other worlds that we continuously see on an endless loop. So if it seems I'm going a little bit hard on the game here, well, yeah, maybe I am, but I think it's not entirely unfair. After all, we're seeing the same generic game loops over and over again, not just in these Star Wars titles, but pretty much across the board. But that said, not all is lost. I still do have some hopes for this game, perhaps more so than many other people out there, specifically when it comes to the spaceship sections. Now, Ubisoft, for our IGN video, went to great lengths to explain that they really didn't want loading screens between planetary areas, planetary surfaces, and space itself. And yeah, I wonder who they're digging at there. Now, whilst obviously there are some hidden loading screens here, and these come in as you're transitioning through the atmosphere, it's much better than cutting to a loading screen, or a literal loading screen that we saw in Starfield. So the experience with Outlaws is far more seamless. It does look a little bit more visually interesting and far more immersive. So that should generally translate to a much better experience in the sense of leaving one world such as Tatooine, heading up into space, going into hyperspace, and then reaching another star system and landing down on another planet. It's something I'm very curious to see how this actually feels. The areas in space themselves also look very nice, suitably cluttered. There's a lot of different details going on here. Now, whilst some may argue that space should be wide and open, I don't think this is the type of game that really warrants that type of experience. So all the debris and other cluttered areas we're seeing here, I think is very fitting. It looks visually very, very nice. More impressive in space, I think, than it is down on planetary surfaces. I was also really pleased to hear that there's various different space stations and other type of non-planetary outposts that you can visit. So these should certainly add a whole load of variety to the game, but not only that, they really should hopefully at least add to the idea and the sensation of being in a living, breathing galaxy, far more than just planetary surfaces. In terms of the space combat itself, this does look to be very arcadey. I'm not sure yet how this is going to play out. After all, this isn't unprecedented. Back in the 2001, I think it was, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 was also very arcadey in terms of its space combat and space flight. That was a very, very enjoyable game. Yes, over 20 years old at this point, but I do feel that following an arcade route is not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to Star Wars, and the developers of the game have outright said they didn't want to go down the sim route for this. So that's fine, expectations set, we'll see how that actually turns out. So yeah, right now the reaction towards what we've seen of the game so far seems to be a very mixed bag, trending towards the more negative side than the positive side, but still a few elements there that might give for, well, a hopeful future of this game. Naturally, Ubisoft themselves are doubling down on the release date of August the 30th, despite the general negative sentiment towards what's been shown so far. And to really add some more, well, potential concern here, at least from the investor perspective, an analyst for the Bank of America actually did question Ubisoft on this, asking whether or not they would delay the game due to the negative sentiment. And Ubisoft said that no, they won't. They feel that fans are really going to like the final quality of the game because there's a lot more that they haven't yet seen. Maybe the recent Star Wars spaceships video on IGN is a bit of an indication towards that, although that said, this video hasn't been entirely well received either. Now, these aren't the only videos that have been coming out for the game. There was also some unofficial footage in the term of leaked footage. This showed the first quarter of an hour or so, the first 20 minutes of the game, and yeah, it was quite dull. It wasn't that impressive. So yeah, I'm still not sure what to make out of this game. There's some potential here, I'd say, but there's also a lot of pitfalls as well. Ultimately, what we've seen is certainly, shall we say, bittersweet. It's divisive. On a technical level, there's some impressive parts going on here, but there's also some parts which look far too generic as well, both in terms of the tech as well as the gameplay. Ultimately, making a game in the Star Wars franchise, specifically an open world game, is one that's fraught with all sorts of problems because you've got a whole lot of different people to please, not only casual game players but hardcore game players, and of course casual Star Wars fans, as well as the fans that have been following the game, or the franchise rather, for the past 50 years nearly at this point. Yeah, kind of hard to believe that in 2 years this franchise is going to be half a century old. So there we have it, some thoughts there on the current situation with Star Wars Outlaws, my expectations, my impressions, as well as the general reaction going on within the community. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. Do check out the other video linked on the screen right here. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll catch you next time.